4 men in black suits do not fit comfortably in a 400-square-foot accounting office on the 6th floor of a Baltimore strip mall, but the man at the center of them didn't seem to notice the confined space. He moved through it the way a cold front moves through a city, without asking, without announcing, with the absolute certainty that everything in its path would simply rearrange itself accordingly. Tatum did not rearrange herself. She kept her eyes on the screen in front of her, scrolling through a quarterly reconciliation for a plumbing contractor in Dundalk, and let the silence do its work. She had been expecting someone for the past 11 days, since the letter arrived, hand-delivered, no return address, the kind of letter that didn't need one. She hadn't expected it to be him personally. Stirling stopped at the edge of her desk. He didn't sit. The chair across from her, the one that creaked when you leaned forward, the one her mother had bought secondhand from a courthouse auction 15 years ago, sat empty between them like a dare. "You didn't answer our calls," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to land with weight. He was taller than she'd imagined from the description her father had once given in a phone call she hadn't wanted to receive. Broader through the shoulders, with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from calm but from practice. He was maybe 40, maybe a few years past it. The lines at the corners of his eyes hadn't come from laughing. "I don't take calls from numbers I don't recognize," Tatum said without looking up. "It's a policy." She heard one of the men behind him shift his weight. She heard the small, suppressed sound of a man deciding not to laugh. Stirling reached into his jacket. He set a manila envelope on top of her keyboard. It landed with the flat, authoritative thud of a document that had been prepared by lawyers. "Your father borrowed $190,000 from our lending operation in March of 2022, Stirling said. "He used this firm as collateral. With the accrued interest, the current balance is $243,812. Tatum finally looked up at him. $243,812.60, she said. "You forgot the 60 cents. Something moved behind his eyes. Not amusement, exactly. More like a recalibration. "The figure your father agreed to." "My father agreed to a lot of things he had no right to agree to." She pushed the envelope back toward him, unhurried. "He put up a firm that wasn't his to use as collateral. My mother built Marlowe Bookkeeping. She left it to me. His name wasn't on the deed, the LLC, or the operating agreement. Your lawyers missed that." The man directly behind Stirling, wide-necked with the flat effect of someone paid to project menace, took a step forward. Stirling raised one hand, barely. The man stopped. "The oversight doesn't eliminate the debt," Stirling said. "No," Tatum agreed. "It eliminates your claim to this office as collateral. The debt is still real. The collateral just isn't." She met his gaze steadily. "Which I imagine is why you're here in person." A pause, long enough that she could hear the radiator ticking against the far wall, the distant sound of traffic 6 floors below. "I have a proposal," Stirling said. "You have 4 men with guns in a room that smells like printer toner and burned coffee. That's not a proposal. That's a stage set." Tatum stood up. She was not a tall woman, but she had learned a long time ago that sitting when someone was trying to loom over you gave them the wrong impression. "Say what you came to say." Stirling studied her for a moment. Then he looked at the man behind him, Varro. She would learn his name later, and made a slight, almost imperceptible gesture with 2 fingers. 3 men moved toward the door. Varro stayed. "Your firm handles bookkeeping for 42 small businesses in the greater Baltimore area," Stirling said, his voice dropping slightly with the departure of his audience. "Clean clients, clean records. You have an impeccable audit history, 18 years without a single finding." "My mother started in 2006, Tatum said. "I've run it for the last 4. He acknowledged the distinction without apology. "I need a financial controller, someone with clean credentials, clean history, and the ability to manage legitimate books alongside other accounts. The position would require a legal arrangement between us, a marriage of convenience. You would draw a salary that clears this debt in 4 months. In exchange, I launder your money, Tatum said, while being your wife so I can't testify against you. Stirling's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. In exchange, you keep your firm, clear your father's debt, and never worry about a late notice again. Tatum looked at him, at the expensive suit, at the composed face and the careful architecture of every single word. She thought about the 18 years her mother had spent building something honest in a city that made honesty expensive. She thought about the past 6 weeks, since she'd spotted the irregularity in 2 of her clients' vendor records. A shell company called Halloran Consulting, appearing without her authorization, receiving payments routed through legitimate client accounts. She'd spent 3 weeks quietly tracing it. She knew exactly where it led. She reached into her desk drawer. She pulled out her own manila folder and placed it on the desk between them. Halloran Consulting, she said. Registered in Delaware, no physical address. 2 dormant bank accounts that show activity only when my clients pay their invoices. Someone routed payments through Marlowe's legitimate client base to clean those transactions. Someone used this firm's good name without my knowledge or consent. She kept her voice flat and informational, the way she delivered bad news at tax time. I know what you are, Stirling. I've known for 6 weeks. And my answer is no. The silence that followed had a different quality than the ones before. This one had edges. Varro's hand moved inside his jacket. It didn't emerge, but the movement was precise and deliberate, the grammar of men who communicated in implications. Stirling did not look at Varro. He looked at Tatum, and for a long moment she had no idea what he was reading in her face, whether it was courage or something that only looked like courage from the outside. Her heart was hammering at the back of her ribs in a way she refused to let reach her expression. Then Stirling pulled out the creaking chair and sat down in it. Not as a threat, not with the deliberate slowness of a man drawing out a sentence. He just sat, like someone who had somewhere else to be and had decided, contrary to all logic, that this was it. Show me, he said. Tatum stared at him. What? The Halloran transactions. He nodded at her folder. Show me what you found. I just told you I know what you are. I refused your proposal in front of your men, and now you want me to walk you through my audit findings. I want to know how you found it, Stirling said. His voice had changed very slightly, lost some of its evenness. My accountant has been running that routing structure for 2 years. No one has found it. Your accountant, Tatum said, because she genuinely could not help herself, is running the variance check on a quarterly cycle instead of monthly. The discrepancy only surfaces if you reconcile at the transaction level instead of the category level. She paused. Which most bookkeepers don't bother to do. But you do. I charge more than most bookkeepers. Stirling looked at her for a moment. Then, without theatrics, he said, Show me what you found, all of it. Tatum should have told him to leave. She should have picked up her phone and dialed her mother's old lawyer and said something useful about 4 armed men and hostile debt collection. She should have done a lot of things. Instead, she opened the folder. She spent 40 minutes walking him through it, not only because she was afraid, though she was in the way of someone who has made a calculation and accepted the consequences, but because there was something profoundly disorienting about watching a man who moved through the world with absolute certainty sit across from her in a creaking second-hand chair and genuinely listen. Stirling did not interrupt. He did not check his phone. He asked 3 questions over the course of the hour, each one more specific than the last, each one demonstrating that he understood exactly what she was telling him. By the time she finished, Varro had stepped fully outside the door. She didn't remember when that had happened. You could have gone to the FBI with this, Stirling said. I know. Why didn't you? Tatum closed the folder. Because whoever I handed this to would have burned my clients along with you, 42 small businesses. Most of them are people like my mother was, people who built something honest and slow and entirely by hand. I wasn't going to feed them into a federal investigation. Because your accountant chose them as a routing mechanism. Stirling was quiet for a moment. He turned his head and looked at the wall behind her, the framed print her mother had hung there years ago, a reproduction of a Hopper painting, a woman alone in a diner at night, the light outside the window very dark. He looked at it for a few seconds, as if he were actually seeing it. "My father ran numbers in this city," he said, not quite looking at her. "He ran them badly. By the time I was 16, he owed money to 3 different operations. Men used to come to our apartment. I learned to count by sorting through what he hid in the coffee cans under the kitchen sink." A pause. "The debt doesn't die with the man who made it. You know that as well as anyone." "I know it," Tatum said. "I just don't accept it as a permanent condition." Something shifted in his expression. Something she wasn't sure she was meant to see. "The offer stands," he said, standing. "The offer doesn't stand," Tatum said. "I'm not a shell company, Stirling. You don't route things through me." He was quiet for a beat. Then he picked up his envelope, tucked it into his jacket, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "You're very good at this," he said, without looking back. "I know," Tatum said. He left. He came back 3 days later. Not with Varro, not with anyone. He knocked, actually knocked, on the glass panel of her door at 9:30 in the morning, and when Tatum looked up from the payroll she was running, he was standing in the hallway in a dark coat, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the shop on the corner she used every morning. She stared at him long enough to make a point, then she unlocked the door. He set 1 cup on the desk near her without fanfare. "You said you'd rather the whole situation burn than let your clients get pulled into a federal case." He took the hard chair against the wall, the one nobody ever sat in voluntarily. "I need to know how many of them are compromised." "Why?" "Because I want to move the routing." He met her gaze directly. "Clean break. New structure. I need to know which of your clients' records have Halloran contact points so we can close them without triggering a variance flag." Tatum looked at him. "You want me to help you cover your tracks." "I want to help me stop using your people as cover," he said. "Those are different things." She thought about that. She thought about the Dundalk plumber, who had 3 kids and a wife on disability, and had been a client since her mother's first year. She thought about the woman in Hampton who ran a florist shop and cried every April at tax time, not from distress, but from relief that the numbers had worked out. "Take the work table," she said, pointing to the small overflow table against the far wall. "I'll pull the Halloran contact records. You're going to log every one of them by date and transaction ID." She kept her voice level. "I am not touching your money. I'm documenting what happened to mine." Stirling looked at the small work table. It was not a table designed for a man accustomed to corner offices. He crossed the room and sat down at it. They worked for 4 hours. He was meticulous. He didn't complain when the table wobbled or remark on the inadequacy of the folding chair. He logged what she told him to log. When he transposed 2 digits on a transaction ID, she caught it before he finished the line, and he corrected it without comment, without irritation, without anything except a slight additional care in the next entry. Around noon she ordered sandwiches. She didn't ask what he wanted. She made a guess. He ate it without comment. She was refiling the Q3 records when she heard the downstairs door open with more force than necessary. She knew from the sound, the particular velocity of it, that something was wrong before she heard the footsteps on the stairwell. 2 people, moving fast, not like clients, not like anything good. Stirling was on his feet before she finished processing what she'd heard. He crossed the room in 3 steps, positioning himself between her and the door, and the transformation was complete and instantaneous. The man who had spent 4 hours logging transaction IDs at a wobbling work table was simply gone. In his place was the cold front, the thing that moved without asking and without apology. The door came open. 2 men she didn't recognize, neither of them in suits. They carried the wired, twitchy energy of people who had something to prove and not enough experience to know when to stop. "Cray wants his answer," the taller one said, looking past Stirling at Tatum. Word is you've been spending time in strange places. He wanted to know why. Tell Cray, Stirling said, and his voice was so absolutely level it was almost frightening to hear, that he has 48 hours to retract the inquiry before I retract it for him. The shorter one laughed. It was not a real laugh. You're alone, man. No backup. You're sitting in a bookkeeper's office with no. Stirling moved. It was not cinematic. It was not choreographed. It was approximately 4 seconds of extremely efficient action that ended with both men on the floor of her office. One holding his wrist at an angle. Wrists don't naturally achieve, the other sitting against the wall trying to remember how breathing worked. Stirling hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't raised it at all. He stepped back. He adjusted his collar. He looked at the two men with an expression of total indifference. "Walk out," he said. "Leave the way you came." They left. The sound of them on the stairwell was considerably less confident than the sound of their arrival had been. Stirling turned around. He had a cut along his forearm where a ring had caught him during the exchange. She could see the dark spread of it through the grey of his sleeve. He seemed to notice her noticing it and started to reach for his coat. "Stop," Tatum said. He stopped. She went to the supply cabinet, 3rd shelf. First aid kit, her mother's habit, carried forward like most of her mother's habits because they were the kind that worked. She brought it to the desk, opened it, and pointed at the creaking chair. Stirling sat in it. She pushed the sleeve back and assessed the cut, long and shallow, the kind that looked worse than it was but needed proper cleaning. She uncapped the antiseptic and pressed a gauze square to it without asking for his readiness. He didn't flinch. He watched her hands with an expression that was very carefully controlled and didn't quite manage to hide how surprised he was. "You should have had Varro with you," she said. "I didn't know they were coming." "That's the problem with not having Varro with you." She began taping the bandage, working methodically. "Who is Cray?" "A man who fills vacuums," Stirling said. "He's been watching for signs that my operation is losing cohesion. Apparently spending 3 days in an accounting office reads as losing cohesion." "Is he right?" Stirling looked at her. "Not about the cohesion." She pressed the last piece of tape down and stepped back. He looked at the bandage. Neat, tight, the work of someone who was precise by instinct. And then looked at her. "You could have left the room when they came in," he said. "It's my office." She put the kit away. "I don't leave rooms I own." She sat across from him in the hard chair. "What happens now with Cray?" "I handle Cray." "That's not an answer." He was quiet for a moment. "He'll push again," he said finally. "He's been looking for proof that I'm distracted, that I'm letting something slide. He'll escalate until one of us decides the cost isn't worth it. And you'll win." "Almost certainly," he said it without satisfaction. "That's never been the question." "Then what has been?" He looked at the hopper print again. The woman alone in the diner, the dark window behind her. He looked at it long enough that Tatum understood he was finding words carefully, which she hadn't expected from him. "My operation runs on a kind of trust most people wouldn't call trust," he said. "It looks like fear from the outside, but fear has a shelf life. It corrodes." A pause. "I've been looking for something that doesn't." "You mean a wife who looks legitimate," Tatum said. "I mean someone who can look at every set of books I have and tell me the truth about what they see," Stirling said. "Someone without a stake in the answer being comfortable." He met her gaze. "I have people who tell me what I want to hear. I have people too afraid to tell me what they actually see. I have never had anyone find a hole in my operation and hand me a folder about it, instead of running or selling the information." Tatum said nothing. "You said I wanted to route things through you," he said. "You were right. That's what the proposal was. A transaction." He rested his elbows on his knees, the posture of someone genuinely tired, the exterior dropping half a degree. "I'm not sure that's what I'm offering anymore. I'm not sure I know exactly what I'm offering." He looked at her. "That is not something I say." "I know," Tatum said quietly. "Then you know it costs something to say it." She sat with that for a moment. She thought about her mother, who had told her the only thing worth building was something you could put your name on without flinching. She thought about 11 days of waiting for men with guns, and how she had arranged her desk each morning with the folder within arm's reach and the exit route noted, as if she could account manage her way through whatever was coming. She thought about a man who ran an entire city in the dark, spending a morning logging transaction IDs at a wobbling table without being asked twice. The debt, she said, I pay it back, structured as a legitimate loan, properly documented, at a real rate. Not wiped, repaid. She held his gaze. I'm not starting anything that begins with someone doing me a favor I didn't earn. That will take years at your current revenue. I know I'm good at plans that take years. Something moved through his expression. Not quite a smile, but the structural possibility of one. The Halloran routing, she continued. I close it out properly and do the remediation work. After that, if you want Marlowe involved in your finances, you pay the rate on my website and you don't ask me to touch anything I can't put my name on. She paused. And you don't bring men to my office without calling ahead. That's a terms sheet, he said, not a partnership. Every partnership starts with a terms sheet, Tatum said. If your world operated on any other basis, you'd already know that. He was quiet for a long moment. The radiator ticked. The light outside the window had gone the grey-gold particular to a Baltimore winter afternoon, the light that never quite committed to being beautiful or bleak, just honest about the season. Stirling stood. He reached into his jacket slowly and deliberately and set the manila envelope, his, the original, on the desk. He held it there with 2 fingers and slid it the 6 inches toward her. The debt note, he said, my copy, it's yours. She looked at it. I'm not handing it to you, he said. I'm leaving it on your desk. There's a difference. He took his coat from the hook by the door. She hadn't noticed him hang it there, hadn't registered when he'd taken it off. Have Varro send you the contact information for my current accountant. You'll want to see the full structure before you agree to anything. I haven't agreed to anything yet. No, Stirling said, but you will. You're very confident for a man with a bandaged arm. I'm confident, he said, pausing at the door, because you spent 18 years building something you can put your name on, and when you had 6 weeks of evidence against me, you used it to protect 42 other people instead of yourself. He held her gaze for a moment. That's not someone who walks away from a problem that needs solving. He left before she could answer. She sat at her desk for a long time afterward. The envelope was there. She didn't open it. She already knew the number to the cent. She looked at the hard chair with the slight new indentation in the cushion where he'd sat. She looked at the hopper print. The woman alone in the diner at night, illuminated by interior light, the darkness outside the window enormous and patient. Then she drafted an email to all 42 clients. She told them, precisely, truthfully, in language that was careful and clean, that she had identified a vendor irregularity in their records that she was in the process of resolving and that their books were clean. She sent it at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon. Then she locked the office, took the stairs down to the street, and walked to the coffee shop on the corner. She ordered 2 cups, her usual, and a second one she was making her best guess on. She walked 6 blocks to the building on Calvert Street. She had identified weeks ago as the address behind the LLC, behind Halloran Consulting. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. She knocked on a door with no nameplate. The door opened after a long moment. Stirling stood in the frame, jacket off, tie loose, the white bandage on his forearm stark against his dark sleeve. Behind him was a large room full of the kind of controlled disorder that meant real work. Papers, open laptops, a whiteboard dense with names she made a professional effort not to read. He looked at the 2 cups in her hands. I made a guess, Tatum said. He took it. He looked at it. He took a slow sip, and something crossed his face that was, without question, the beginning of a smile. You guessed right, he said. I usually do, she held his gaze. Show me the books. He stepped back from the door and let her in.